image generated by a mathematical equation. Very simple one. But he says because we now have modern high-speed computers, we can see the shape that was never before visible because it's generated by millions of calculations. And my assessment of this is that it's a graphic image of infinity, of eternity, such that it looks like, just so you recognize it, there's this kind of a bug shape. It's kind of like this, and then there's this smaller thing, and then there's this other little thing which comes off like that. But it's all zigzag. It's like, well, so what? If you don't know what you're looking at, it's like, so what? But if you know what you're looking at, with the computer, they can zero in on this piece, which, because it's actually not a round, it's kind of an ellipse. And so the equation that generates this curve is different than the one that does this curve, because this is a little bit more of a sweep. And so as the computer pulls in, the geometric shapes in here are just mind-blowing. And they're different than the ones that go in here, which are different than the ones in here or here or here. And as the computer pulls in closer and closer and closer, all of a sudden you see this same shape again. And if you pull in closer to that shape, you'll see this shape again a few layers and generations deeper. And what you realize is, I'm looking at eternity. Any decision I make to look at this shape or this point or that sets up an entire universe. And if you think of every little zigzag as a possible, call it a planet, call it the quadrant of the universe, of outer space that you could go to, or a type of thoughts thinking in your mind, you realize this is beyond our ability as humans to grasp and retain sanity. And if you look at this shape, you almost feel like you've got vertigo, or you're falling it's like you're in a fog, at night, on a ship, in a storm. You don't know up from down, and you suddenly find yourself panicked to look at this image. If you really think about it, you can't tell whether you're at this level of the picture or 10 levels in or 10,000 levels in, because it's the same picture, and you lose all sense and reference of where you are in time or space. And I realized in looking at that, it's enough to make anybody go insane. And he said, we didn't invent this. This was not a mathematical thing that somebody artistically rendered and said, hey, look what I did. We found it. We found it with computers. But it's existed from the beginning. The almighty creator of heavens and the earth invented this thing. And in his mind, he has been to every single nook and cranny possible. And then when you see that, just going like, it's beyond my ability to even wrap my mind around that, but I tried to. For that experience of, it's a picture of the mind of the one we know and love. So I'm recommending it. It's a picture of his imagination. If you can put your head there, if you can get any appreciation from it. It's like going to this, I've got these friends that run this extraordinary bed and breakfast down in Sonora, California, Nose Hill. Every dish that she puts out is the very best she can possibly make, for presentation, for flavor, for taste, and the time. And Yahweh has prepared for us things that are beyond our framework of even imagining or wrapping our mind around. And when he offers us life, and we think, well, it must be like, you don't know what it must be like. If this is a clue as to where his mind has gone, and he says, hey, the choice is yours. You want to go on a journey with me? Well, this is generated with numbers. But the Hebrew letters are numbers. Each number represents one thing, a quantity. But each letter represents a vast array of things, not only a quantity, but a picture and an action and this depth that are orchestrated by the Moedim. And if you think then that each letter is a number, plug that into this equation, and all of a sudden this thing is hyper-dimensional on steroids like is beyond what there's even words to describe. And that's just a little taste of what is prepared for those who love him and those who are decided that, hey, I'd like to see some of that stuff. I'd like to mess around in that world. And it seems like it just starts with learning the ABCs. Learning the ABCs. So let me show you something very simple about learning the ABCs, or the Aleph, Bet, Gimels. Just so you know, why I went through all that is to try to give you a little appetizer or a sense of stirring up maybe a palate, get you salivating for maybe the meal. In other words, why should you look at the alphabet? What's it matter? If this thing doesn't stir up an intellectual appetite, that's okay. If you want to learn Hebrew just because you want to learn Hebrew, that's okay. If you want to learn Hebrew because that's the text that the Bible is written in, that's okay. Or because it's his face, that's okay. Or because the Hebrew describes who the Messiah is, that's okay. If you don't want to believe that, that's okay too. But I'm just trying to show you that Hebrew is so huge and vast and tasty. It's beyond anything you can imagine that it is. And if you just learn how to say, Hodu la Yawakito, Ki Leolam Chazdo, that's okay. Make of it what you will. It's this wide open, infinite dimension. Here, the letter Aleph, modern Hebrew, when you look at words that are translated, look at the English side. When you see something that says, I will go to the store, the word probably starts with an Aleph. The word I am, there's half a dozen different words for I am. They start with an Aleph. The English words, artist, architect, author, administrator, those start with Aleph. Aleph is silent, and they kind of give it what we always called a default expression, kind of like eh. But it's actually no sound at all, it's silent. When you have the word ehyeh, it starts with an Aleph. So the letter Aleph itself is a picture of an ox, or an ox head. So here you have an ox. There's his nose, there's his jaw, there's his eyes, there's his ears, there's his horns. And what you end up with is this shape, and that shape, and that shape, and that shape, and that shape, which gets you that shape. See that? So this is just, sometimes you'll see this shape, which became our letter A and the Greek letter alpha. It's all the ox head. So when the Israelites made a golden calf and said, oh, this is Yahweh, they were just messing with the alphabet. And Yahweh said they just profaned themselves, that's it. They did the equivalent of witchcraft and sorcery. Because Yahweh said, no image. Not male or female, not animal, insect, reptile, bird, fish, no image. Well, what he said was, you didn't see an image when I spoke to you. You heard a voice. He chose to present himself as a voice, not an image. But then I could say, okay, so the Jews to reject a human incarnation as a man and say, oh, that's God, for them to reject that, well, they're doing good. Why? This stirs up a problem which I'm just going to address and then leave alone. Just you'll have to discuss this amongst yourselves. Why can we say the God who said no image, not male or female, shows up and then says we should worship the female Virgin Mary or the male Jesus the Son as God when he already said no image? That's confusing. That's disturbing. So The Jews say, we ain't doing nothing with that. And the Muslims say, hey, you guys have a human deity, so now we have to kill you because we reverence the deity of Abraham and we can't do that. And suddenly we're thrown in a pickle, as it were, going, what are we supposed to do? We know this guy comes from heaven, but we worship him as God because we know the guy who comes from heaven is God, but now these guys want to kill us because we're breaking the words of the instructions. That's the same predicament I think the Israelites bumped into when Aleph is an ox. Moses disappears up the mountain, so Aaron says, hey, let's throw some gold into the fire. And out comes this ox. Hey, this must be Yahweh, validating that he's the Aleph, the ox. And then he gets in trouble for it. I told you guys not to do that. Why am I telling you this? Because there's people around that have said to me, you guys are doing idolatry. If you say that this Aleph, which is an ox, represents the Almighty, that's idolatry. You just made an image. And so they will not regard the Paleo-Hebrew because that's a Canaanite deity, which is idolatry. End of story. That's why the Jews will not regard Paleo-Hebrew. I'm letting you know where the trouble is. And it is troublesome. So if I say the words out of his mouth is him, and there's an Aleph, and that's an ox, did I just say that an ox represents him? No. There's something about ox-like attributes. Strong, powerful. What do you do with an ox? Well, an ox is an easily domesticated, powerful animal that you yoke up and you use it to pull a line, digging a furrow in the field so you can plant things as a farmer. And what they do is they put a sign, a mark like an X, way off in the distance, and the ox would, because of the way its brain is designed, it'll pull a straight line right to that. So if you yoked up this ox, he's going to pull the plow as a straight line to the sign in the distance, which is a big X. And literally, the letter Tav, shaped like an X in the Paleo, literally just means mark or sign. So there's something in the imagery of the alphabet where this ox is going to pull something, that Aleph to this Tav, the beginning and the end. So, if I was going to go here and run through multiple different layers of multiple different meanings of the letters, well, there's a class that we did in 2011 called Erectology, which is 60 hours, and we barely touched the subject. You can go watch that. It's on YouTube. We can't do that. So I'm just going to show you a couple little things here. But just to say, once you get past, we're not promoting idolatry. We're not promoting sorcery. This is not promoting the occult, and this is not saying that we should worship a man as God. We worship Yahweh our Elohim, the speaker of these words, our Heavenly Father. Yeshua said, I go to my Father and your Father, my Elohim and your Elohim. Follow me. He said, I am the door. No one gets into the Father's house except through me. And he is this word in human form. Now there's more to be said about that, but I'm going to leave that there. I am not promoting idolatry. If this, like the intention of yoking up the ox and pulling it, is self-referential, like the English letter I, meaning the self of the individual who is now going to do something or say something. That's what's represented by the Aleph, which is represented by the ox, which became the letter A. They're concepts behind the image. And when Israel made it about the image, they got in really big trouble. The next letter is a bet. If I drew the bet like this, you could almost see the embryo that first develops the head with the eye, and then the backbone, out of which comes the arms and the legs, almost like a tadpole shape. This is the mind, and this is the extension of the mind. Call it the spine, central nervous system. It's to take not only shape, but personal identity, which is to say, who is the mind who then drives the vehicle? So this body was given as a vehicle. But this being a body, the word bet simply means house, just like the letter aleph simply means ox, but the word aleph also means taught, trained, domesticated, which is to say, one who is of the house. So even the meaning of the letter aleph finds itself defined by the meaning of the next letter bet, because these alphabetic letters are necessarily in association with each other. But to go back to a little illustration I gave you a few minutes ago, let's say that the I, the self, the person, says, I would like to go down the street to the store. Okay, this becomes an idea. So aleph happens to be the silent letter. Silent. It's pronounced eh, or sometimes as ah, but it's really a silent letter. Your ideas are silent in your own head. It's a spark of consciousness. So aleph is actually the spark of consciousness of the guy who gets the idea and says, hey, I want to yoke up this ox and pull a line to the top. So this is the target of the idea, known as aleph. So very specifically, aleph is related to tav. But just to give you a little story, if your idea was, I want to go to the store, you get in the car. So you have to make yourself a car. So is this a house or is this a car? Is this some sort of a vehicle? It's something which embodies like a body. But somebody will say, hey, in Hebrew the word bet doesn't mean body. There's another word for body. The flesh body is actually like the word basar, but that's actually flesh. But what I'm saying is that suddenly the words start overlapping and blending, and there's always going to be somebody that says, ah. Don't believe it if you don't want to. It's okay. I'm trying to show you that there's this underlying way to read Hebrew, and we're probably more than halfway through, so I'm going to bring this to a conclusion by showing you the whole alphabet. But what I'm trying to show you by going in depth with the first 4 letters is that it just sets up a way for you to understand the way all the letters work. If bet is a car, a vehicle to embody, gimel, it could be drawn as the head and neck of a camel. As a neck, the camel eats something and it goes into the stomach. So this is actually a link between this and this. Which is to say, here's one city and another city in the truck that goes back and forth on the roadway, carrying cargo. The modern Hebrew letter gimel is the letter with a foot. They even say it's the letter with a foot. Why? Because this is the verb action. So if this is the noun, and this is the idea, you see the progression? Okay, listen. If you get an idea that you want to go to the store, so you get in the car, and the car starts moving, what's the next thing in that progression? You have an idea, you get in the car starts moving, then what?
You arrive.
No, before you arrive. How do you know where you're going to arrive? Don't tell them. What?
You yield or slow down and make sure you're close.
You yield or slow down to what?
make sure you're close to your destination.
How do you know where your destination is?
The big sign.
What does the sign tell you?
What the spot is.
So how do you know if it's over there, or if it's over there, or if it's back there?
You go look for the sign and see it.
You need direction. Why do you suppose the word direction starts with the letter D, which is a dalet, which is a door? And what were you saying it was, Hugh? Steering. If the car's moving, you got to be able to steer. Steering. And what is steering? Choice.
Ooh.
Just slip that in on us.
So here at the very, very, very beginning of the alphabet, the guy who dreamed up the idea of the physical universe, bet, the stars, the planets, birds, trees, fish, everything that exists, and has it all in motion with self-sentient, conscious, personal identity. The very first matter. He gives them choice. Even a bug has a choice. Where's he going to go? Now he might be influenced by fire, or here comes a bird, and whoa, hey. But even at a simplistic level, soon as he made the place and got it working, bam, steering, choice. So how can we deny somebody choice? So that my friend, who, like I said, he says, you know, you offer a homeless guy, I'm not going to give you money, I think you're going to make a bad choice. We're denying that guy his most supreme rights that the Creator himself has provided. So he's saying, look it, I'm going to give him $1 or $5 or whatever, and if he makes the wrong choice, that's on his head. And one of these days, he might decide to make the right choice, and then it's to his virtue. But if we deny him the choice, we have usurped his will, which is actually witchcraft and sorcery, imposing our will on another. Whoa! And we thought it was just casting spells and potions. When we deny somebody a choice, we've betrayed Yahweh's heart. Gosh. There's a message in A, B, C, D. And we could continue on with every single letter, deeper and deeper and deeper. And when Moshe says, I put before you the choice, life and death, I suggest, that's the letter Hey. It's the word the, and it's a suggestion. It's like, here's a window with light shining through it. It's the picture of the guy with his choose life! But it's only a suggestion. And once you make the decision, it's like riding down the road and you want to put it into gear. I decide I want to go left because the sign told me to. You engage. You turn the steering wheel. You shift the transmission into gear. That's the letter Vav. Connect. That letter Vav is, you might see written like this sometimes, because that is this shape, which became this shape, which became this shape. Our letter F. And so Vav, F, Vav. Drop this off and F, F, F. I'm just trying to show you that the same English letter, it's the Greek letter digamma, which they stopped even using. It's not even in their alphabet anymore. But it's all the same letter. if you know how to see what you're seeing. It means to connect. If this was a goblet, somebody was talking about the water pouring ceremony. You pour one thing in this side, wine, and something in this side, water, and they mix. Remember Joseph had a goblet? And his name was Zaphnath Paneach. That's what Joseph's Egyptian name was. It's not an Egyptian name, it's Hebrew. It means the one who can decrypt hidden messages. And he held a goblet. The word Yosef is spelled Yod Vav Samik Pei. The word Samik Pei, we get the word for Sefer, which is the book, or to encode or decode, is Samik Pei Resh. But Samik Pei, Sof, is where we get the word sofa, like the couch, which means to collect or gather, but it's also a goblet. And this word Yod means he will. So Joseph's name means he will gather. And remember what he ended up doing? Gathered up all the provisions of food that belonged to the Egyptians. They came to his threshold. The word also means threshold. And he gave out the provisions. But it also means goblet. And so when Joseph was sitting there with this goblet, don't you know, by this means I can see the great mysteries? He was holding on to his Hebrew name. And even his brothers didn't know. But remember, he put the goblet in Benjamin's sack? There's these encoded messages all through the Hebrew. And it has to do with the reading of words. Sephering. What's the symbology of the blood and the wine? Yeshua, you look at Daniel 12:4. The archangel Gabriel comes up to Daniel near the end of his life and says, got a job for you. That's an aleph. Here's your job. Here's the idea. Hide the words and seal the book. Now this is the idea being manifest. Hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. For many shall run to and fro. There's the verb. And knowledge increasing. He then says, I saw one on this side of the river and one on that side of the river. And then I saw one above the waters of the river. So seeing one on this side and that side is like this gimel. And I saw one above the waters of the river, dressed in white linen. So what I'm suggesting is one way to read Daniel 12 is incrementally, each phrase follows the alphabetic sequence. And when you get to the Dalet position, it's this one above the waters of the river, dressed in white linen. Well, people say, whoever those people are, people say that symbolically, metaphorically, water represents peoples. So if there's peoples, waters of the river, and there's one above in this Dalet position, then regardless of who you identify that guy as, it's a Messiah type of a figure. He's clothed in white linen, and white linen represents righteousness, so this Messiah figure is not some dirty, stinking, rotten scoundrel who's the head of a false religion, as your teachers might have told you, but this is the true Messiah figure. Clothed in white linen above the waters of the river, and Daniel says, hey, how long till the end of these wonders? The next position, which would throw you into the Vav, I'm going through progressively, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'm just trying to show you something. He makes reference back to that guy in the Dalet position, and he says that guy who was above the waters of the river, clothed in white linen, he holds up his right hand and his left hand. That looks like the Paleo letter Vav. That's why I use this letter shape instead of that letter shape, because you can see the goblet and you can see the man in the Vav position of Daniel 12. And it says, he swore by him who lives forever. The word to swear, as we mentioned the other day, is the number 7, which is spelled Shin Bet ayin, and it literally means to swear a vow. So what Daniel just encrypted into Daniel 12 is that this guy who holds up his right hand and left hand that looks like the Vav of the goblet of Yosef is the same guy as the Dalet. And when Yeshua said that he is the door and no one can get to the house of the Father except through him, the word spelled Bet Gimel Dalet in the Hebrew dictionary means to deceive, betray, beguile, to camouflage, to be cloaked, camouflage in disguise. Here's another way to read these first letters. I, who am the creator of the heavens and the earth, who put the whole thing into motion, I put myself into format of matter, gave myself a foot to walk the earth in disguise, looking like a man who would be, this is also number 7 is Zion, which is weapon, who would be put to the weapon. Then let's read it backwards. Because of the vow, so that he would reveal the door, gimmeling, returning back to the house of the Father. There's Messiah's job, embedded in Daniel 12. According to the meanings of the letters, and the rest of the alphabet can be read the same way with the extended part of the message. But without going into too much here all at once, I'm just trying to show you that if you go to Rosetta Stone or any other Hebrew teacher on the internet or in school, they'll teach you how to read Hebrew. But I would be willing to bet you no one's going to show you this. But I'm also saying that there's probably a bunch of people out there that say I'm a darn fool, an idiot, or a liar, that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I recommend Isaac Moseson, Origin of Speeches, fantastically, but he hates the Paleo-Hebrew and won't even, he said he'll never talk to me again. That's his choice. And I can't invade his choice. I still recommend his book because he'll tell you how the original, what he calls the Edenic, Garden of Eden, the Edenic language, is actually Hebrew, and it morphed and permutated and became all the languages of the earth we have today, and they can all find their way back into Hebrew, and he'll show you the trail of how it happened. Isaac Moseson's book is fantastic. And he's a guy that's on the internet with a blog and this whole thing, but he hates the Paleo. Okay. I'm just trying to show you something. If you can read these letters, self-referential, this is a story of what he's going to do. And this guy was going to be put to the weapon. Just to tell you one more piece of the story, the next letter is a het, which is a fence, or a tomb. This guy, put to this weapon, is going to be put into a tomb. Tet is like a round basket or something round, and a big round rock was rolled in front of the tomb, and the letter Yod is the hand that grabs. The Roman seal was put on that tomb to make sure that the dead guy wasn't getting out, or that nobody else was coming in to steal his body. When Pilate put this Vav man to the Roman weapon, the other way of writing the letter Zion, I write like this, which was an axe, means to cut off. They also wrote it like this, which was really a piece of an evolution of this, which is a plowshare. It became, if you take pointed plow teeth and make them round discs, like a disc plow, it would look like, and it became our letter G, which is the 7th letter. So our letter G, written like this case here, is still a morphed aspect of the Paleo Zion, which is a weapon. Well, if you take a plow to the earth, that's certainly a weapon, and the Roman flail ripped across the back of this Yeshua was certainly ripped open the flesh of his back like a plow. The story is still there. And when Pilate said, hey, look at what our weapons did to this man, he was effectively fulfilling the prophecy. This alphabet is a prophecy. I, who made the heavens and the earth, gave myself a foot to come down to the earth. Okay, this is the dalet drawn as a triangle, but the dalet is the number 4, and why I'm saying that it's earth is because in some world of whoever, 4-ness speaks of earthiness. So you got terra and tetra. But you have north, south, east, west. Winter, summer, spring, fall. Earth, air, fire, water, basic elements. What I'm saying is, I'm just saying these things are clues. They're not necessarily specific. So when Yeshua rose from the dead and was walking on the road to Emmaus with a couple of his disciples who didn't even recognize him, and he said, hey, what's going on? Well, haven't you heard? No, tell me about it. Oh, gosh, man, they killed our friend, hung him on the cross and buried him. And he then proceeded to go back to the very beginning and disclose to them the hidden secrets, the mysteries of all the prophecies that just didn't look like prophecies. Embedded in the narrative story were all these things concerning him. And when they finally got to the destination in Emmaus, they said, hey, won't you come in and eat with us? And he did, and he broke the bread. Disappeared. They said, oh, that was him! Then they recognized him. People don't recognize him in this story. I'm showing you, this is him in the story, and Pilate brought it to evidence. Ecce homo, behold this man. What our Roman weapons did to his camouflaged earth suit. And the Jews are the ones that made it happen, the Pharisees, by putting Pilate up to it. And yet, can't they see this? If you can see this, you can see Zaphnath Paneah. This is such an incredible hidden treasure. It's the veritable Holy Grail. You know how many millions of dollars and millions of lives were lost looking for some stupid piece of metal that somebody drank out of? What do you think good that is going to do for you? If there was such a thing as a Holy Grail and you drank a sip of wine or a glass of water or whatever might have been out of it, what do you hope to get? Health, wealth, prosperity, eternal life? Guess what? This guy who claimed to be the way back to the house of the Father, for the sake of listening to his words, promised us health, wealth, prosperity, eternal life, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. This is the Holy Grail. The Aleph Bet in the pictographic Hebrew. I believe that Yosef knew this stuff, that he would have gotten it from Abraham because it came from, I believe, before the Tower of Babel, before even Adam and Eve in the garden, and I believe that Yahuwah, the first word he spoke was Peru. That's the word be fruitful. You know why the land and country in South America is named Peru? Because it was a fruitful land. It was named by a Hebrew. I'm going to stop here. But it all goes back to learning Hebrew. I'm just trying to give you a taste of the value of the treasure. Shalom. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Isn't Hebrew the only language in the world that was totally lost and got revived?
I couldn't account for that. I don't know. People say those kind of things, but Hebrew was used maybe in the synagogue, maybe by scribes, so I can't validate the story one way or the other. Go ahead and close it up.
Oh, it's got 12 more minutes.
That's okay.
Okay.